Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, co-founder of democracyatwork.info, the author of numerous books. His most recent, The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself, also available as an ebook. He's the host of Economic Update, a program right here on Free Speech TV, Economic Update with Professor Richard Wolff. And Prof. Wolff on Twitter is his Twitter handle. Professor Wolff, welcome back to the program. I'm reading actually in numerous sources. The one that kind of flagged this for me was Adam Tooze's Substack newsletter, but others as well, that, you know, there are basically three large asset classes that fly around the world: securities, stocks, debt, bonds, and real estate. And as the inflation rate is going down and the interest rates are going up, the price to the monthly payments that people have to make in order to buy a house are just exploding, which means that they can afford less and less expensive houses, which is starting to drive housing prices down. And if this precipitates a crisis or a crash of some sort, and because every country in the world basically has to raise their interest rates when we do, even if they don't feel the need to, because otherwise their currency gets debased against the dollar. I mean, are we looking at a worldwide real estate crisis? And if so, what does that mean?
Well, I think the honest answer is we don't know, but we're very afraid. Adam Tooze is in that group as well. So am I. We don't know because everything now depends on all the linkages in our economy, all the ways that producing fish in Japan is connected to getting bananas out of Central America or making software programs in Silicon Valley. The network of debts, of buying and selling, is so intense, so intricate, and so poorly understood that the question is only, will the downturn in housing, which we are already involved in, ramify? How will it impact everything else? Could it take everything down with it? Absolutely. I mean, the conventional wisdom now is that the crash of 2008 and 9, the so-called subprime mortgage crash, begins where its name implies, in the housing sector. And it was one of the second worst collapse of capitalism in the history of 400 years of this system that we've now had. So could it do it? Yeah. Could it be the beginning of real economic distress? Absolutely. Will it be? That depends. Again, it's like we're making a test case, only the problem is the test case is us. We're testing it on us. Do we have enough resources? Have we adjusted enough since the last crash in 2008 and 9? Did we learn enough lessons? Are the political conditions going to allow us to apply the lessons we've learned? All of those are questions which we don't have the answer to, but how we get finally to an answer will tell us whether this downturn in housing is going to be the canary in the coal mine and the explosions are coming.
Yeah, something that could bring the whole thing down. One of the other phenomena that we're seeing with regard to housing is hedge funds and giant vulture capital funds and whatnot moving into housing. I mean, literally, there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal about a year ago about how every Monday, I guess, they hold the auctions for distressed properties or tax sales in Atlanta. And these guys would show up literally with laundry bags, cloth laundry bags filled with checks, bearer checks, bank checks, whatever you call them, certified checks, in quantities of $100,000, $500,000, and $10,000. So they could just buy anything and have the money to instantly pay for it. And then they're buying up all these houses and then turning them into rental properties. And in some communities, there was one that they talked about in Nashville where something like a major chunk, I forget the percentage, of the housing in that particular community, that particular suburb of Nashville, is now owned by one company. I think it was BlackRock. And the average rent has gone from around $1,000 a month up to $1,700 a month, again, if my memory serves me correctly, in just a couple of years as a consequence of this, because once they kind of control the marketplace, they just start jacking prices up. And you combine that with the fact that it's getting harder and harder for first-time home buyers. Entry-level homes are just, kind of a thing of the past. What does this mean for housing and for our economy, first of all, and perhaps more importantly, in your mind, what are the best policy solutions for this? I know some countries aggressively limit who can own residential real estate, limit speculation in residential real estate. The other thing is there are a lot of foreign buyers for real estate in the United States. My understanding is there are more foreign-owned empty homes in the United States that have been bought as investments than there are homeless people in the United States. Now, I can't verify that number, but I've read it several places. So what does all this mean, and what do we do about it?
Well, let me respond by telling you a brief little story. I live in Manhattan, not very far from Fifth Avenue, and I have friends of mine who take visitors, Americans mostly, from other parts of the country on a kind of a tourist trip in New York while they're here. And one of their favorite things is to walk up Fifth Avenue, a very chic part of New York City, in the southern half of the city. And they do it at night. And they point out to the tourist, look at all the windows that are dark. Here we are. It's a winter evening. Nobody's out and about, or very few are. But there's nobody there. And then it's explained to students what you just, to the tourists, what you just said. Namely, these are safe deposit boxes. They've been purchased by wealthy people around the world as an investment.
These are apartments.
It tends to go up. If you have a niece or a nephew visiting New York for a few weeks, they stay there. But other than that, it's loads and loads of empty houses and of empty apartments, and across the street, sitting on the curb, are homeless people staring at the empty apartment, but they can't put these two things together. I think the basic way to answer your question is this. Housing is one of the most important things in any society. Food, clothing, shelter, right? Those are the basic things we need. Housing is the shelter part. Either you manage that as a basic right, it's like having enough food, having enough water, having enough air, or you don't. If you leave it to the market, what you're saying is housing will be a profit-making enterprise. If it's profitable, it'll be produced. If it's profitable, its price will go up. If it's profitable, its price will go down. But profits is what the key decision-making variable is. And we now see what the results are. Two statistics to keep in mind. We have a higher percentage of young people married in their 20s living with their parents in the same house as we've ever had in the history of this country. Young people cannot afford what it now costs to get an apartment, let alone a freestanding building. That's very, very important. People doubling up and tripling up. A statistic that you have to really search for to get a handle on is also exploding. We have a crisis. We don't have enough housing for the people who either you give them more money so they can afford it, or you bring down the price. Don't give them more money because they can afford it at the going rate of wages and salaries. You got to do one or the other if you allow the market to control it. So what can people do? Well, the most famous example in the world is the city of Vienna. In the city of Vienna, half of all the housing is public. It's owned and operated by the government, the city government of Vienna. Rents are maintained by the government, very affordable, as a percentage of income, much lower than here in the United States. They're beautiful. I visited them. These are beautiful apartment complexes. You'd love to live there. None of the social negativity associated with public housing here in the United States. And by the way, conservative governments, liberal governments, left-wing, right-wing, no one dares do anything to change this situation in Vienna, because literally half the population would immediately vote you out of office if you even threatened to do anything to take away. They have lots more money for everything else in life because the cost of public housing maintained as a public service is much lower than each competing landlord. Even if they own bunches of apartments, they are driven by a profit motive. The city doesn't have to do that. And the end result is subsidized housing. Yeah, but it's beloved by the people of Vienna, and they're not all stupid and they're not all backward. They're just as clever and smart as we are here, no more, no less. But they've opted to make sure that they have their housing problem solved.
So what are they, we have a minute and a half left before our hard break, by the way. What are they doing right that we did wrong with public housing in the United States? How did our public housing projects that largely started in the 60s out of the, the Great Society, with the best of intentions, turn into ghetto hellholes in many cases?
Well, I mean, I don't mean to be a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe in all of that stuff. But I will tell you that a lifetime of studying urban politics in our country has taught me that the real estate interests, private real estate interests, are an enormously important part of the political.
Oh, yeah. Jared Kushner's a slumlord. Yes.
Yes, I mean, it's they don't want to lose the investments they've poured in. They own private housing. They don't want a well-run, low-cost public alternative because it would threaten, at least to some degree, their private enterprise and their private profits, with the justification that comes later that somehow we're supposed to believe that the private profit motive will get us a better result. I mean, it simply isn't true. But if you are a private realtor and you are threatened by public education, making sure that the public education isn't, the public housing isn't properly maintained, isn't properly serviced, isn't made an attractive way to live. That's why I use the example of Vienna. Go there, look at them, and you'll see what it can be.
Yeah, I've been there. It's a beautiful city. Professor Wolff, it's always great talking with you. Thank you so much, and happy holidays to you. Best of Thanksgiving.
Same thing, and for all of you at that station, it's a pleasure working with you.
Thank you. Back at you, sir. Professor Richard Wolff, democracyatwork.info. We'll be right back.